In yesterday's Tanya, we had the first part of the compiler's foreword to Tanya, the Alter Rebbe's Hakdama, his foreword to Tanya. And yesterday, the Alter Rebbe laid out the case for why reading anything from a book is inadequate and why a book can never be a substitute to a personal audience with the Rebbe, which is what the Chassidim wanted. They wanted to be able to actually enter and go to the Alter Rebbe and ask them their questions as opposed to having a book. In today's Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, however, that's not possible. On a very simple level, in the years after the Alter Rebbe became Rebbe, his following absolutely exploded. And the Alter Rebbe had tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of Chassidim. The Alter Rebbe had a huge territory in Lithuania and White Russia and Ukraine. And there simply wasn't the time. It wasn't the time for the Alter Rebbe to be able to devote to personally answering the questions from all of his Chassidim. And the Alter Rebbe also notes another advantage of having a book over private audiences, that something which is said over in a private audience can be forgotten. And this way in a book, it's something which is preserved for posterity. But yesterday the Alter Rebbe spoke about the problems with a book. After all, what if the person doesn't click with the book? Maybe the author isn't speaking to the individual soul of that person. And therefore the Alter Rebbe says a very important line over here. The Alter Rebbe says, Ach biyoidai umakirai ka'amina. This book is addressed to those who I know and those who I recognize. These are the people who have come to me. They've already asked me their questions. I know them very well. I know what their questions are. I know how to answer them. So I'm addressing this book to these people who I know individually. And therefore I know for a fact that this book contains all the answers to the questions that these people have. Now here we are, some 225 years later, and we're still studying the Tanya, and the tradition by Chassidim is that that's because the Alter Rebbe is testifying about himself that he's a Yoidei Umakirai, that he knows every single one of us, and in fact he had every single one of us in mind when he was writing in Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe is telling us that any question that any one of us might have in our service of God, and very specifically going back to what we were talking about 2 days ago, in the Pasuk Yikara Ve'elecha Adavar Miyoid, when we're struggling because Torah mitzvahs and serving Hashem might not come easy, and any question that we might have in that regard, the answer to that will be in Tanya. And then the Alter Rebbe says, and what if you study the Tanya, you have a question, and you don't have the answer? Alter Rebbe says, no problem. Take your question and take your Tanya and go to the scholars in the city. The way the Alter Rebbe talks about it, he says, the G'dolim of the ear, the great people in the city, tell them what your question is, and they will show you in Tanya where the answer to that question is. In other words, Alter Rebbe is saying, there is no doubt that the answer is in the Tanya. And if you can't find it, maybe you need someone who has a greater understanding, a deeper understanding of Tanya to show it to you, to explain it to you, but undoubtedly it's there. And with this, the Alter Rebbe really lays out what Tanya is all about. It's the answer to every question that anyone might have in the area of serving Hashem. We can learn Tanya, we can find the answers. If we can't find the answers, we need to find a Tanya scholar who will show us where the answer to our question is, but it's definitely there.